Yo, what's up guys, Bajheera here. So for this video, haven't made one like this in a while, but we're gonna give it a try. This is gonna be my macros and keybinds video. Now, we're gonna have to lay a few little pieces of groundwork before we get into the basic stuff. So first things off, what is a macro? So it's basically something in WoW that allows you to perform multiple actions at once. These can be very, very useful for things like using an ability on your focus target or a target within the arena that's not something that you're actually targeting. There's other macros that allow you to perform multiple actions at the same time. Like if you wanted to perform Avatar and Warbreaker at the same time, you could do that. There's also fun little macros that I use that will change what a certain keybind does depending on what my talents are. You can also put scripts in a macro, so you can just press that button and it will do the script for you. Some people use that to set up their UI. I mostly just use add-ons for that. But there are some very basic elements to what a macro can do and what it is. And the one rule that you probably want to remember is that you can only have one ability on the global cooldown per macro. So if you wanted to make a macro that was Mortal Strike and Overpower, that macro would not work because you can only have one ability on the global cooldown per macro. What you can do is things like Charge and then Hamstring, because Charge and Hamstring, or Charge is not on the global cooldown. Same thing with Ignore Pain. You can macro Ignore Pain in with pretty much anything. Some of those macros, though, may require more than one key press, so just keep that in mind. It's just that you can press the same button and it'll do multiple things. I think that's the basics of macro. And another thing before we get into it is I think it's way more important to learn how to write a macro than it is to share with you my particular macros myself, because I can share with you my own macros, which is cool. But basically it's, you know, give a man a focus macro, focus pummel macro, he can focus pummel. Teach a man how to write a focus macro, he can focus anything. So that's kind of the basic premise here. And in terms of my keybinds, I'm using Bartender is the add-on that I'm using to configure my keybinds the way that I want. I can make a separate add-ons video, and I plan to. So before you guys are curious about that, I've made add-on videos in the past. The one from 8.2, I believe it was, is still pretty accurate, but I'll make an updated one anyway, just for fun. And the mouse that I'm using is my lovely sponsor, Corsair Scimitar. Now that you can use a Scimitar, normal, Scimitar Pro, Scimitar Elite. All that is fantastic. Recommend the Scimitar absolutely for, you know, pretty much all my games, but it's also super, super nice to be able to bind your abilities to a 12-button MMO mouse. And the Scimitar is the one I recommend. And you can, of course, scroll down in the description to find a link and a 10% off promo code, Bajheera, to save yourself some cash monies on any Corsair and Elgato products. So just keep that in mind as well. But with that basic foundation laid down, one more thing is that, once again, your macros are going to be something that allows you to do things that you want to do, and your keybinds, I definitely recommend you set those up in a way that is comfortable for you. But for this video, it's going to be much less about this is what you should do and more about this is what I'm doing, and feel free to take inspiration from that. But you definitely want to make your character and your sort of game experience comfortable for you, and that will that'll help you out. But I suppose the way I want to start this off is to probably just scroll through my macros that I have and give you guys an idea of how to write a macro. And if there's anyone in particular that you think is cool, you can definitely put that into use. So this might be a bit of a long video, but we're just going to buckle down and get right to it. So first thing on the list is this is how you write a macro in general, right? So for example, I have a Battle Shout macro. You don't need a macro for this. You can just straight up bind Battle Shout, but this is just an example. You're going to see this general syntax repeated quite a bit. So you're going to do the hashtag tooltip, and then you're going to say whatever ability you want the tooltip of this macro to show. So if I scroll down here, it'll say Battle Shout. So it'll actually show the tooltip of this ability. Now this can be useful for situations where I want to show the tooltip of Mortal Strike. I want to see Mortal Strike tooltip on my bar, but make that button not actually do Mortal Strike, make it do something else. And you'll see that later on. And then you just do /cast Battle Shout. So this macro right here will show you the tooltip of Battle Shout, and it will cast Battle Shout when you press it. This is for Siege Breaker for Fury. It'll show tooltip Siegebreaker, so I'm not currently spec for Fear. I don't have Siegebreaker, so it won't actually show Siegebreaker right now. But it'll cancel Aura Bladestorm, and it will cast Siegebreaker. So this is a time where I want to press Siegebreaker. If I'm Bladestorming, it'll cancel the Bladestorm, and it'll press Siegebreaker. So this is another one of those cool things that you're going to see me doing a lot in my macros, is this /cancel aura, all one word, then Bladestorm. So if you wanted to cancel aura Bladestorm to Pummel, to Shattering Throw, to Fear, to Charge, all those things, you can slap a cancel aura Bladestorm in that macro so that as soon as you press it, it's going to cancel your Bladestorm and do whatever you want it to do. So I think having a cancel aura Bladestorm in certain macros is really helpful, and it's going to be one of those things that you see me using a lot. So once again, I'm trying to help you guys learn, so you're going to understand the tooltip, you're going to understand the /cast, and then you're going to understand this cancel aura Bladestorm. These are all interesting tools that you can use to put in your macros, and you're going to see me do that a lot. Another thing to mention is that you can, for this /cast stuff or /use items, you can just open up your spell book, and you can just shift click it right into your thing, right? So I'm not going to do that for those macros, but you can do that. So you don't have to write it out if you don't want to. This is my Bladestorm macro. It's also a macro that will throw down Ravager right on top of me. So it's just show tooltip Bladestorm as usual. It'll show the tooltip for Bladestorm. And when I have Bladestorm talented, it'll Bladestorm. When I have Ravager talented, it'll throw the Ravager right down on top of me. And how you do that is the @player part. So you do /cast, and then you do a square bracket @player. Square bracket Ravager. So you can use this for like any sort of aimed ability. Probably not Heroic Leap, because I don't think you can Heroic Leap right on top of yourself. But this is also could be useful for the Kyrian Spear, for example. If you wanted to throw the spear right on top of yourself, you could do that. Another thing that will follow this model that I don't really use very often is @cursor macros. So you can make a macro that's @cursor Heroic Leap, and that will make you Heroic Leap wherever your cursor is, rather than having to press, your keybind and then aim it. I still like to aim these personally, but if you didn't want to, anything with a little targeting reticle, you can just do an @player or @cursor, and the @player will throw it down right on top of you. @cursor will throw it down wherever your cursor is at that time. So that can be useful for that. But I like to have @player Ravager for dungeons and stuff, just Warbreaker Ravager, just let it rip. This will also cast Ignore Pain. So right now I'm experimenting with throwing Ignore Pain in a lot of different macros, just because you can, right? Once again, you can put abilities in as many abilities as you want that aren't on the global cooldown in one macro, since Ignore Pain is not on the global cooldown. And what I mean by the global cooldown is when you use an ability and your whole bar kind of, there's a little cooldown there. That's what I mean by the global cooldown. So just to make sure we have that foundation laid down. But yeah, so this is going to make sure that I have Ignore Pain up right before I go into a Bladestorm. You can press Ignore Pain during your Bladestorm as well, but that's just one of those things, because you go into your Bladestorm, like if you have you're going to generate rage during your Bladestorm, so if you don't have Ignore Pain up, you might want to just launch it during Bladestorm right beforehand, but that's one of those things that you could take out. And another fun thing to mention is you're probably going to see it in other certain macros, but if you want to have something in your macro, but not delete it, but not have it activate, you can just press another little / and this will make it not do that anymore. But that's nice for like, if you're like, oh, I'm not sure I want Ignore Pain, I'm going to test it without it, but you don't necessarily want to delete it, you can just do that and it'll deactivate it in the macro. So this is Death Wish. This is one of those examples of a macro where I want to see the keybind or the tooltip for Bloodthirst, but I don't actually want to cast Bloodthirst. This is back when I was using Death Wish. So some of my buttons on my action bars, you'll notice, are repeats, and some of those are just visual. This is an example of that. So it'll look like Bloodthirst, but it'll cast Death Wish. Another really fun macro type that I like a lot is a show tooltip. You can put a hashtag show tooltip, and then whatever you're actually going to cast, it will show the tooltip of whatever ability is actually active. So in this situation, it'll show Whirlwind, because the Whirlwind is what's actually going to be showing, what's actually going to be used. But this is a really fun macro type for, like, I don't really like to change my keybinds like a ton. I don't want to have, like, this kind of helps you cut down on keybinds, I should say. But in this situation, it will change the ability that this macro activates, depending, or I guess I should say, it'll change what this button press does, depending on your talent. So when I'm talented for 3/3, which is Rend, it'll turn into Rend. When I'm talented for 1/3, which is Skull Splitter, and not Rend, it'll turn into Skull Splitter. So this basically is like, if I'm doing PvE, now of course, if I wanted to have Skull Splitter and Rend, I have to make a different keybind for that, but because I think Rend has some utility in PvE right now, so this could kind of be tricky, but I'm not using Skull Splitter much, so if I was like in PvE and I was going to do Sudden Death, then it would turn back into Whirlwind, or PvP. So if I'm talented for Massacre, it'll turn into Whirlwind, basically. So this is kind of a situation where my different builds, like if I'm on my PvP build, it'll be Whirlwind. If I'm in my single target raid build, it'll continue to be Whirlwind. If I decide to do Mythic Plus Cleave, it'll continue to be Whirlwind. Basically, this is just gonna be Whirlwind for me. Any situation where I'm not rending, or I'm not playing Skull Splitter. That's the basic stuff right there. So it's just kind of a funky keybind, and the way that you do that is you say /cast closed bracket with the colon, and then you say, so this is the third talent row, and the third ability on that row would be Rend, right? So when it's talented for Rend, it'll do that. When I'm talented for Skull Splitter and not Rend, right, then it'll do that. I guess it takes priority on whichever one is first, but I don't really use Skull Splitter that often right now, so I'm not super worried about it. I think Sudden Death is still a better talent, so I'm not that little overlap isn't going to be a big concern. But if I wanted to do this, then that would be Skull Splitter. So, but yeah, so you say, and you'll see me use other macros like this in the future. I think this is a pretty neat little thing that you can do. So this is going to be one of those things that when you're talented for something and you want the keybind to be that thing, then you just have to use this sort of setup to make it work. So once again, when I'm talented for 3/1, which is Massacre, it'll be Whirlwind. When I'm talented for 1/3 which is Skull Splitter and not Rend, it'll be Skull Splitter. And then when I'm talented for Rend ever, it'll turn into Rend. So that's pretty nice. On to the next. This is another one of those cancel Aura Bladestorm macros that I was telling you about. You have you show the tooltip of Shattering Throw, and you cancel your Bladestorm, and then you cast Shattering Throw. That's very much similar to other cancel Aura Bladestorms that you're going to see with like Pummel and stuff. This is another sort of macro type. This is a mouse over intervene macro. So I believe you should be able to do at mouse over as well. But I feel like I've seen a lot of these like help and no dead things, and I feel like I may have tried to make a at mouse over macro and it didn't work. So I put this in there and it did. You can try just at mouse over macros and that might work as well. It's very similar to cursor, very similar to at player. At mouse over is another one of those things that you can use, which will make you intervene or use whatever on your mouse over target. Some people use this for like a dispel and things like that. I don't use a ton of mouse over macros as a warrior, but I feel like intervene does make sense with that. So you can just intervene whoever you're mousing over at the time. And how you do that is show tooltip intervene, and you do /cast space square bracket out mouse over comma help comma no dead with no spaces, and then square bracket space intervene. That makes sense? Hope so. This is another macro. This is my go-to ignore pain bind. Now there's been a lot of questions about this. I think I mentioned this like in my pre-patch guide that I had an ignore pain and overpower macro. So I think it's important to have an overpower button that doesn't press ignore pain, just presses overpower, because you don't always want to burn rage on ignore pain. I think that's useful for having really high uptime, but you can imagine in situations like PvE, or when you're in situations like you're just behind a pillar on a healer and you're not really in danger, you want to just press overpower and not ignore pain. You need to have a bind separate for overpower, but I don't think I don't think this macro is that bad if you wanted to use it as your only overpower like button. I just don't think it's what I recommend. So I do think it's okay if you want to use this as your like ignore pain bind though, because one of the things that's fun about ignore pain is it costs 40 rage, so it often procs a tactician. And even though ignore pain is off global, like sometimes you might press it off global, and that's fine. This if you press this button while you're on the global cooldown, like cooling down from an ability, it won't overpower, but it will press ignore pain. But if you're not on global, or you want to be really fast with your next global, and you don't, it's okay if that global is overpower, then if you press ignore pain, if this macro, then it'll ignore pain, and it may grant you a tactician proc, and then you can immediately just overpower with that tactician proc, which is pretty cool. So this is my ignore pain bind, but as you've seen, I have ignore pain in a lot of other buttons too, just to experiment. This is kind of a neat one. Like I said, I recommend that if you use this as your ignore pain bind, that's probably fine. But if you want to use this as your only overpower bind, you may be using rage on ignore pain when you don't need to, and that could hurt your rotation a little bit. But that's one of the fun things about Warrior right now is you have a lot of the kind of like fun rage management. It's not, I'm not sure it's quite as cool as Heroic Strike, but ignore pain is very, very powerful defensively, and it's one of those things where, like, if you have a Mortal Strike coming off cooldown in 1 second, maybe you don't want to use ignore pain on for, you know, 40 rage to put you at 0 rage when you could be Mortal Strike in the next global. But if Mortal Strike is on cooldown for, you know, 4 more seconds, and your next global is going to be overpowered, maybe you could go ahead and just slap this one on there if you have enough rage to ignore pain during that time anyway. But Mortal Strike is the priority. But once again, we could make another video about rotation and stuff like that. If you'll notice, I'm making these Warrior guides kind of in chunks, because these videos take a while, especially the macros and keybinds videos. So hang in there. I'm not really sure what this one does. This one, I think, oh, I know what this does. This just shows, this just makes me a keybind for whatever trinket I have in this second trinket slot. So this slot is 13 and this one is 14. So you could just say use 13 for this trinket and use 14 for this one. I also have a cancel or a Bladestorm in here for some reason. I'm not really sure why I did that. Maybe it was for using like an on-use trinket, like a Drestagath or something like that, and you want to cancel your Bladestorm to Drestagath. But as you'll see, I have 2 little slashes in there, which means that's not going to activate. But I just have this on my bar for, like, this is your human, or like your PvP trinket. Like if I usually use this slot for like my get out of CC trinket, but right now I'm using Relentless. So, but you're not going to be like canceling your Bladestorm to use that get out of CC trinket, because Bladestorm makes you immune to CC anyway. So this is going to be this is going to be like another PvE trinket or something like that. But anyway, you can use that to have a trinket. So it's going to show tooltip, whatever trinket you're using in that slot, and it's going to use it, right? So there's that. This is my Ancient Aftershock macro. It's just going to show tooltip Ancient Aftershock. Got it bound right there. You can, since it's on a minute 30 cooldown, just macro it with Avatar, so it uses Avatar every time. I've been using that for like BG blasting, which is pretty fun. Not something I would necessarily recommend for PvP, because you're not always going to want to Avatar to get out of like roots with that. But it's not bad just for damage. But sometimes you don't want to overload too many offensive and defensive cooldowns in one macro, because then you're kind of like not making the best use of them situationally, right? I would call that a newbie macro. Something that just like pops a bunch of cooldowns, but maybe leaves you a little bit vulnerable later on. But sometimes it can be fun for like BG blasting, right? I'll show you another couple examples of a newbie macro. Maybe even the Overpower falls into that category, but it's not that bad. And I'll use Overwhelming Power Crystal, which is just another PvE trinket that I have. That's a minute 30 cooldown, so it's nice. So this is just my show tooltip Die by the Sword macro. So this will just show the tooltip for Die by the Sword, and it will cast it when I press it. For you Kyrian out there, you could use the newbie macro style where you use File of Serenity with that. Once again, like things like macroing Hellstones or File of Serenity in with other defensives might be a bit of an overlap, but once again, it's kind of a newbie thing. I'm not Kyrian, so I can't even use this macro anyway, but I have that in there just for fun if I wanted to mess with it eventually. This is another one of those examples of a keybind that changes depending on what I'm talented for. It'll show the tooltip of whatever that is actually going to cast when I press the button. But when I am talented for Cleave, it will cast Cleave. Whenever I'm talented for Warbreaker, it'll cast Hamstring. And whenever I'm talented for collateral damage, it'll cast Slam. So this is basically like single target raid is the only time I'm ever going to use collateral damage. So the fact that this keybind becomes Slam is fine. Warbreaker is pretty much whenever I'm doing PvP. I want to actually have Hamstring there, and I want to see it there, even though I have Hamstring bound other places. It's just kind of one of those things that I feel like doing right now. Then whenever I am doing PvE Mythic Plus stuff, I'm using Cleave these days. I like Cleave. It's pretty good. I want it to cleave, and I want it to be cleaving on that button. So this is kind of just a button that I press situationally depending on what I'm doing, and this will change that keybind for me automatically, which is kind of cool. I like that. That's a cool little macro type that I've used a bit more recently. I think this is I installed Azeroth Autopilot for like leveling. I haven't used it yet, but I think this just automatically made that macro for me. I don't really know what it does. So I have to find that out. So War Banner, I just have Cancel Aura Bladestorm and War Banner, the same the same macro syntax that you've seen me use quite a few times now. It's almost like I have a macro that shows the tooltip and uses the ability for everything instead of just putting the ability in my bar, which is kind of funky, but it is what it is. It shows the tooltip for War Banner, and this is different than having War Banner on your bar, but just kind of grayed out. Because this lets me know whether I'm spec'd for War Banner or not. So when I'm not spec'd for War Banner, it's going to give me a little question mark. But when I am spec'd for War Banner, it's going to show it. At least it should, right? It lies to me. Oh, I'm not in war mode, so it's not going to show it because I'm not in war mode. Can't use it anyway. All right, never mind. But that's it still works that way. It's just not going to actually show you. But yeah, it'll cancel my Bladestorm and slap a War Banner down. I don't believe you can put a War Banner down during Bladestorms, that's why. BMX, people have asked me what this macro is. It shows a tooltip for execute, so now we're getting into some of these macros that are on my bar down here. I used to bind a lot of my abilities to my scroll wheel for rotation. Now I don't. I use my actual MMO mouse keys on the side of the mouse for my rotation mostly. But I still like to see my binds down here just because I've done it like that way for so long. This will show the tooltip for execute. It's not actually going to execute, but it'll count. This is actually my Disarm keybind. It will cancel Bladestorm and Disarm. It's also the button that I use to throw a bunch of flags on people in battlegrounds and stuff. It is awkward though sometimes when you go to Disarm somebody, but they die, and then you accidentally throw a bunch of flags on them in arena. That can kind of get you into a bit of trouble. It's sort of funny, but it's sort of BM, so that's why it's the BMX. It's the bad manner execute. Because sometimes you get some bad manners, but it's mostly my Disarm keybind. This is a cancel or a death wish macro. Unfortunately, you can't do this anymore, but it was really sick. I'll just delete this this macro actually. But it was really cool in the beginning of BFA Season 1 where you could play Death Wish as Fury and then cancel it at any time. That was really nice. So you could like get 10 stacks, be blasting somebody. Somebody swaps to you to try to kill you. You just cancel all your Death Wish stacks and they waste their go. It's pretty cool, but you can't do that anymore. So farewell, friend. This is a charge macro. Not sure if this is one I even use anymore. I don't think it is. But it'll show tooltip for charge, and it'll slash cast charge, and it'll slash cast hamstring. So this is just an all-in-one like solid warrior macro. You charge, and then when you arrive to your target, you press that same button again. It'll hamstring them. I also have experimented with this being rend. It will not cast rend right now because I have the 2 slashes on it. But you can, if you would rather charge rend instead of charge hamstring, you could do that. You could charge mortal strike. You could charge whatever, right? Anything that's not on the global cooldown, you could put in there, and that would be fine. But I use hamstring. It'll also cancel my Bladestorm if I want to cancel or a Bladestorm in charge. If I'm playing Fury, I'll have it cast Bloodthirst. I probably should actually take this out too, because I think you can hamstring now as Fury, so we'll just put a little thing there, and then it won't Bloodthirst anymore. It'll also cast at Arena Pet Taunt. This is just kind of fun just to be annoying, and it'll also bring the pets to you so you can cleave them. But you do that by slash cast close bracket at Arena Pet 1. So the same thing for like at focus, at a certain player, at your mouse over, at player. It's the same sort of thing. At Arena Pet 1 is the thing to do though. And you can do at Arena Pet 2 and at Arena Pet 3. This will just taunt pets in the arena to you, right? I think healers can use this to like break traps and stuff. You might want a keybind that's a little bit, more like use it on demand rather than just kind of spam it like I do right here. But that's another option that you have, is to cast at Arena Pet Taunt. That's a charge macro. This, I think, is just making sure that I have combat text enabled. I haven't really had to use this macro in a while, but I think at one point my add-ons had turned off combat text, so for whatever reason you turn that off, then you just use this command, /console floating combat text combat damage space 1. It'll turn that back on for you. This is a Colossus Smash keybind. It'll cast Colossus Smash, and it'll cast Sharpened Blade, and it'll also use my Dark Moon trinket right now. It'll also use my Overwhelming Power Crystal for PvE. This is mostly like not going to use either of those trinkets for PvP, but it does work in PvE. So you slash cast Colossus Smash, and it'll also do Sharpened Blade. So this is another example of a newbie macro that I still use a lot. I don't think it's bad to have Sharpened Blade up when you Colossus Smash, but there are times where you might want to Colossus Smash but not Sharpened Blade, and if that's something that you want to do, then you just go ahead and just slap a little double slash on that bad boy, right? Easy peasy. But yeah, it's just going to do the same thing, right? It's going to show the tooltip for Colossus Smash. It's going to Colossus Smash and apply Sharpened Blade. So Sharpened Blade is off global cooldown, so you can put it in the macro. Colossus Smash is on global, so this is going to be the only global cooldown for that macro. But since these trinkets are also off global cooldown, you can put them in there too. You'll also notice I have Avatar in there. So if I wanted to use this macro to cast Colossus Smash with Avatar every single time, well, not every time, right? Obviously, because it's 45-second cooldown on Colossus Smash, a minute and a half cooldown on Avatar, but you know what I mean. You could do that. But once again, I have that double slash, which means it's not going to do that because I think that's a newbie macro. Sometimes you want to definitely use Avatar to get out of roots and stuff rather than just let it rip with Colossus Smash. But if you wanted a Colossus Smash and then Warbreaker, you could just, or sorry, Avatar Warbreaker, you could just have another button that you press because Avatar is off global cooldown. Hi, Archer. So this is a macro that will allow me to press Avatar if I'm talented for Avatar and Deadly Calm if I'm talented for Deadly Calm. Just with those cast, it's that same sort of way to write that, to do this thing. The slash cast close bracket talent 6-2, which is Deadly Calm. Or sorry, no, this is Avatar. It'll be Avatar, and then if I do 6-3, it'll be Deadly Calm. It'll also Sharpen Blade, it'll do the Orc thing, it'll do Saltwater Push, and this is mostly kind of, all this stuff right here is for like BGs. And it'll also use the Overloading Power Crystal. It will not cast Colossus Smash. You could have that in there if you wanted to, but it could lead to some situations where you are away from your target in a route and you want to Avatar, and then you press Avatar to break the route, but then you also just slam down Colossus Smash in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of awkward. So if you're going to have this be Colossus Smash, just be advised. But this is mostly just a macro that will do Avatar Deadly Calm, depending on what I'm talented for. But it is my go-to Avatar bind right there. Disarm, this will show tooltip for Disarm. It'll cancel my Bladestorm and it'll disarm. This is mostly just a visual thing. I have it right here. It's just a visual thing to show whether I'm talented for Disarm or not. That's all there is to it. Same thing with this duel, right? It's just a, like the cancel or Bladestorm is irrelevant because I don't even use this key. It's not actually bound to anything. It's just visual. Same thing with duel. It'll show me whether I'm talented for duel. Then I have an actual duel keybind, which is not gonna work because this is it's not gonna actually cast slam. There we go. If this is my actual keybind, the way you can tell is you say dual 1, it changes it. Okay, this is my actual dual keybind, so we don't want to slam because I believe dual is actually on the global cooldown, so you don't want to have slam there. But you can show the tooltip for slam, just because I like the way it looks. Death Wish, this is just another one of those things where it'll show the tooltip for Raging Blow, but it'll actually cast Death Wish. Execute, this is my actual execute bind. I have it canceling my Bladestorm and executing. Basic stuff. It shows the tooltip for execute, cancels Bladestorm, executes. This is just an extra action button. If you want to press a keybind for your extra action button rather than having it be something that you click over here, you can make a keybind for that. Shattering Throw, once again, same kind of thing, right? Except that this time, it's not the same thing. This time it's focus. So this is the first time we're going to see ways to write focus macros. So you could do show tooltip, Shattering Throw. Once again, we know what that's going to do. We cancel or a Bladestorm. We know what that's going to do. And then you have slash cast target equals focus. Now I believe you can also write at focus instead, but for some reason I wrote this one as target equals focus. This with a square bracket. No, it is a square bracket still, and that works. So target equals focus, Shattering Throw. What this means is that when you set a target as focus, even if you are targeting this, right? I gotta walk all the way over here. Let's do it this way. So I'm targeting this guy. I'll set this guy as my focus. You can make a separate keybind to set as your focus. What it's gonna do is it's gonna chuck the Shattering. Oh, sorry, I set this guy as my focus now. Okay, awkward. All right. Even I'm targeting this guy, it's gonna chuck a Stormbolt at this guy who's my focus, right? Same thing with this. So if I wanted to focus charge, focus sphere, or just focus sphere this guy, even though I'm targeting this dude, I can focus this guy and it'll chuck it at this dude, right? Or even pummel too. Like I'm targeting this guy, I can still pummel this guy. This guy's my focus. So that's an example of that, right? With Shattering Throw. And you're gonna see a lot of macros with this style, right? Because that's how that focus situation works. All right. So same thing with focus Stormbolt, right? You set a focus, and then whenever you press this keybind, it's gonna chuck your Stormbolt at your focus rather than whatever you're targeting. So same thing, we can do that again. I'm targeting this dude, right? We have set this guy as our focus. So when I walk over here and if I'm attacking this dude and I want to chuck a Stormbolt at this guy, boom, chuck a Stormbolt at your focus. That's how that works. So you're gonna see me having focus charge, focus sphere, focus pummel, focus Stormbolt, focus Shattering Throw. You can even make focus hamstring, focus disarm macros if you wanted to. But that's how you write it if you decided to do that. Slash cast target equals focus, space or no space, whatever ability you want to cast on your focus target. But I have it showing the tooltip for Stormbolt, I have it canceling my Bladestorm, and I have it using that Stormbolt on my focus. That's the basics of how to write a focus macro. This is like a DK thing, we don't need to worry about that. Not yet. This is my fear, my target button. It's going to introduce you to another sort of basic line you can have in your macros. So it's going to show the tooltip for fear, and it's going to slash stop attack. So you don't want to fear somebody and then immediately auto attack them and break it, right? So if you're fearing your target, it's gonna allow you to. So I'm auto attacking him. I'm gonna fear him, and then I'm just gonna stop attacking him. So the fear just sits there, and you can let the fear not break instantly. You're not usually gonna just fear your target, but if you are, like, obviously you might have deep wounds on them or whatever, but anyway, if you want to target somebody and fear them, that's going to stop your attack while you feel them. And of course, if you're like, well, I want to fear the guy next to him, so I'm pressing fear on my main target, that's fine. It'll stop your auto attack, but as soon as you press another button to attack your main target, it's just you're going to start auto attacking again, so don't worry about that. It's also going to cancel Bladestorm, and it's going to fear. So if I'm Bladestorming somebody, and I want to stop my Bladestorm to fear, it's going to do that. So, and it's also going to stop your attack. So you can put that stop attack macro and other things. Like, for like a rogue, if you're like blinding somebody, you're probably going to want to blind them and stop your attack too, right? That's the same kind of thing. So for anybody who has a CC that breaks on damage, that you want to not break with auto attacks, slash stop attack is going to be a useful keybind for you. This is just for throwing down flags on people. It's not really a macro that you need. It's a little BM. We already have BMX for that, but that's how you'd used it. So like this is just an example, I guess, of using an item. So you could just open up a macro thing and say slash use, whatever the item's called, or you could just shift click that item right into your macro, and that'll work too. Focus Pummel, same sort of thing. I just want to put a space in there. I like the way it looks better. Does the same thing, whether it's a space or no space. Same thing. Show tooltip for Pummel. Cancel your Bladestorm, and it'll slash cast target equals focus Pummel. So it'll pummel your focus target. This is something I use for raid. This is something that you can use once you know the achievement number for Gladiator. You can press this, and it'll show the little quest progress on your little quest log. But this is not the achievement for this Glad, so it doesn't matter. But it's kind of cool. I'll show it once you get the achievement thing. That's how it is. But it's just add tracked achievement thingo. You can probably do this for any achievement, but I use it for Gladiator. This is my enraged regen macro for Fury. It'll slash cast and I probably would do a show tooltip as well for this. We can just go ahead and just do that. It'll show the tooltip for enraged regen. It'll press Bloodthirst, and it'll also activate the enchant that or the engineering thing that I had on my belt for the shield. But I like to have enraged regen and Bloodthirst in one macro. Kind of similar for transfusion and Deathstrike for DK. You press this button, you're spamming it. You're like, I'm about to die. You're spamming it. And as soon as you press it, it'll activate Enrage Regen, and it'll Bloodthirst instantly if you can. So that's nice. Hellstone, this is another newbie macro. It'll use your Hellstone and your emblem. This will be a sinful once I get it. So I'll go ahead and change that now. Once again, I'm not sure that you're going to want to use these two cooldowns together. But it will buff your health, and it'll use your Hellstone, so that's nice. But sometimes you're going to only want to buff your health, and sometimes you're going to only want to use your Hellstone. So this is an example of a newbie macro. It does exist, though. So that's just something to look at. This is a keybind that looks like hamstring, but it's actually intervening your mouse over. I don't think I'm using this macro for anything, but it's there. So interesting. Well, I don't know why it's using the tooltip for hamstring, because I have this macro that does the same thing that's intervene. So I think I might just delete this bad boy. I don't really know why this is there. It's kind of weirding me out. Let's go ahead and just delete you. Now I'm gonna be like, where's my macro later on, because I forgot what I was using it for, but it's fine. All right, so this is another one of those keybinds that shows the tooltip of something but does something else. I just like the way it looks. This will show Overpower, and it actually does cast Overpower, but that's not really the bind that I use for Overpower the most. It is a bind that I use to intervene and ignore pain, though. So this can intervene your friends or a friendly target. Let me see if is everybody standing around right here? Hello? No, it's early. There we go. Are you Alliance? So it'll intervene this guy, and it'll also cast Overpower, and it'll also cast Ignore Pain. So it's one of those macros that I'm kind of messing around with. Not necessarily something I'm gonna have all of those binds in one macro. Like I'm not necessarily gonna use this as my Ignore Pain button, but what it can do, which is kind of nice, is it'll intervene your mouse over, and it'll cast Ignore Pain. So like, if you're intervening somebody who's taking damage, then you'll already have Ignore Pain up for that if you have enough rage. It'll also overpower, so it does a few little different things. I think this is mostly just a macro that I like for that particular keybind, not something that's like you have to use this, right? Because you definitely don't want to use this as your main overpower button. I do use this as my main intervene button, but I don't use it as my main ignore pain button. But you can just kind of have fun and have that do a few different things. If your mount has a mount, you can, or sorry, if your mount has a mount special, you can use this keybind to see what that is. I don't have this bound anything, but it is kind of fun. So this is my go-to Mortal Strike button, I believe. This is this kind of thing that you see when you're like, hey, what are you changing before every arena match? It's this. So it'll show the tooltip for Mortal Strike, and it will whenever I press this button, it will set my focus to a certain member of the enemy team arena. So what I usually do is I don't really change my focus very much during the arena match. I'll just set it to the healer, right? So, and this is really only important for like things that can go into stealth, right? Like priests used to be able to go into stealth, but now really only things that go into stealth are like druids. But I guess if an entire, if a druid and everything else is in stealth, like in the beginning of the match, you can just press this button whenever they come out, which is bound to Mortal Strike. So whenever you press Mortal Strike, it'll just reset your focus back to the healer, basically. So if a druid goes in stealth, if somebody else goes and does whatever, then you can just immediately grab them back as your focus. I think it's probably fine if you just leave your focus and just have a bind to set your focus. But just because of what I've gotten used to, this is what I use. And it's fine. It'll cast Mortal Strike. It'll also do one of those things where it'll taunt all the pets. Not all the pets, but it'll taunt a pet to you. So Arena 1, 2, 3, taunt. It'll just, since taunt is off global cooldown, you can just use that and it'll just taunt pets to you. And Mortal Strike. So that's one of the things that I use. So when you're also asking, like, why is he yelling so much in the arena? It's because my character is just taunting every time I Mortal Strike. Kind of funny. This is a DK macro. Don't worry about that. Now, this is something that I use for my teammates. So if I'm just doing, like, random arenas, it's not super important to have, like, if I'm doing, like, a skirmish, I can just intervene to my party 1. So there's two different ways to write this, right? So this is showing the tooltip for intervene. And if I don't have this canceled out, it'll just cast intervene on at party 1. So whoever's party 1 for me, it'll intervene them, right? But this is also something you can do for your teammates. So what I'll do usually is I'll have an intervene 1 for my healer and intervene 2 for my DPS teammate. So slash cast, my boy DPK, we were playing with them last. So it's target equals DPK and it'll intervene. So it'll intervene them, right? So this can either be party 1 intervene or it can be healer intervene, right? Then the same thing, I have party 2, which can be party 2, but I have that double slash, so it won't do it. And it'll slash cast target equals Saucer Boy, who is my enhancer summon friend that we're playing with as well, and it'll intervene them. So that's kind of what I'm getting used to right now, is having the healer veen and partner veen macros again. So that's what I'll do, is I will always put my healer in party 1 macro, basically. I'm just calling it party 1, so that doesn't actually have to be party 1. But I'm sure healers have to have a lot of experience with this too, like Dispel macros, the same kind of thing. But as my Zug warrior self, I mean, I only really have one thing, and that's intervene. Used to have vigilance as well. But anyway, it's target equals my healer name is intervene on this bind, and then my target equals my DPS friend will intervene them. So those are two different intervene binds. I recommend you guys do put these into practice. This is a DK thing. This is pet and heal. DK. Oh, this is like whenever I have like the group finder up and it just keeps pinging whenever somebody's in my group. This will take it off. This is a lot of freaky stuff. I don't really use this for anything, but it's kind of one of those things. It does a lot. It's like, okay, so it's a run, so it's a script, I guess. Q status minimap button period. I highlight anim set script parentheses apostrophe on loop apostrophe comma space function closed closed little parentheses return end parentheses semicolon. Okay, good to know. I don't really use this for anything, but there you have it. This is for recklessness. It's a very similar sort of thing to like other cooldown all-in-one macros. It'll cancel your Bladestorm, it'll cast Wreck, it'll cast Saltwater Push, and cast Blood Fury. Use your DPS trinket, just pop off. So this is kind of a fun thing for Fury if you just want to use all your cooldowns at once for like BGs. Whenever you see Saltwater Potion, you know that's made for BGs. Recording, this is something that I have sometimes if I'm recording a video, people whispering me, I'll just put a /busy. Recording a quick video, might not respond, smiley face. Didn't put that on this time, that's alright. Reflect. So you used to have to cancel your Bladestorm to reflect. You don't have to cancel your Bladestorm to reflect anymore. So I double slashed that. But it shows the tooltip for spell reflect, cast spell reflect. You guys are getting used to this by now, I hope. That's how that works. This is just Dragon Roar. So this is one of those talent macro thingies where now I feel like I wrote this differently because I think I could just show tooltip and it would do the same thing. But I don't think that this is, I guess, a fine way to write it too. I guess this is the second way to write it, where it'll show the tooltip depending on what you're talented to, and then you slash cast Dragon Aura slash cast Bladestorm. This is probably fine when it's on the same row, right? You can use the other talent thing. I think I like the other talent thing better anyway. But I guess this is the way I wrote it before I knew how to write the new talent thing. This is another way to do it. So anyway, it'll show the tool whenever I'm talented for 6-3. It'll show the Bladestorm. Whenever I'm talented for 6-2, it'll show Dragon Aura. This is for Fury, though. And then it'll cast Dragon Aura, cast Bladestorm. So there's a couple different ways to write that particular macro style, I suppose. But anyway, I would probably just write it the way I have my new talent swap keybind thing written, right? But there you go. You can write it that way, too. So this is my Sweeping Strikes macro. It will show tooltip for Sweeping Strikes. It will taunt Arena Pets, and it will cast Sharpen Blade and cast Sweeping Strikes. So all of these things, I hope that you guys are kind of getting familiar with the basic sort of macro syntax that I write these things with. Let's get my guy up a little bit. Shows in tooltip, taunting Arena Pets. It'll cast Sharpen Blade, and it'll cast Sweeping Strikes. Then I also have the cancel Sweeping Strikes. And this will actually cancel a bunch of stuff. I don't know if I really want this to cast Sweeping Strikes. I think I'd rather have it show the tooltip. Sweeping Strikes. What it's actually going to do is cancel my Sweeping Strikes. It'll also cancel Blessing of Freedom. It'll also cancel Blessing of Protection. So the reason why you might want to have a cancel aura macros is if you're running in and you just CC'd somebody, you have Sweeping Strikes up, but you don't want to break that CC, then you want to cancel Sweeping Strikes. The reason why you would want to cancel Blessing of Freedom or Blessing of Protection is if you're fighting mages, you really don't want to give them freedom or give them bop. So if you get bopped out of a CC or freedomed out of a CC, but when you cancel your freedom right after, once that CC is broken, then same thing with bop, right? That you get bopped out of a blind, bopped out of a stun, but you don't want the mage to steal that bop. You just press this keybind and it'll cancel those things. So you can use cancel aura for things other than Bladestorm. Anything that's like an aura, you can use it to cancel that. You used to be able to cancel aura Death Wish, no longer. But that's an example of other cancel aura things, right? Slash cancel aura, whatever buff do you get. This is just another extra action button keybind, I guess. I don't know what that is. Some of these are old macros. This is this will show tooltip for charge, like this right here, but it'll cast defensive stance, right? So this is just my button for D stance, which is not actually this button. I just like this better, this bind better. This is another one of those things where it shows Mortal Strike. It will intervene, but it'll also ignore pain. It's kind of like the overpower macro, but instead of actually casting Mortal Strike, it'll cast Slam. I'm experimenting with not slamming nearly as much in PvP, but this allows me to slam if I want to, like to kill a totem or something. Probably don't need ignore pain here if I'm gonna slam, so I'm gonna take ignore pain out of there. I'm gonna leave it there, obviously, but I'm just not gonna activate it. But yeah, this also intervene mouse over, so I can spam I can get to the keybinds in a second. I know the macros section is long. This is what I'm talking about. I don't make these videos often because they're like an hour long, but that's how you do it. So this is a button that I have for streaming. I don't use it anymore because I don't want to spam too much, but I used to use it back in the day. I don't think as long as I don't do it in maybe if I don't do it in general, and if I don't do it in yell, that's fine. But that's actually too many characters. Oof. So let me see. I'll just take this out. I don't need to put it in general chat. And I don't need to put it in yell chat. But I'll put it in guild and busy that I'm streaming. So this is how you spam your friends that you're streaming. I don't use that anymore, but that's a thing. Taunt. So this also will cancel Blessing of Freedom and Blessing of Protection. It'll also taunt. I might actually take this out because I don't really use this keybind. It's probably fine. It'll taunt the pets, and it'll also cast D-Stance. That's just another one of those kind of quirky things that I've got. But none of this should be new to you, right? It's because you understand how to do slash cast, you understand how to do arena pet, you understand how to do cancel aura, and you understand how to do tooltip. So all this is just the basics. But it's taunt, cancel some buffs, taunt pets, go D-Stance. This is another one of those trinket macros, right? So I used to use this. The reason why I had such a death in there because I was using it on my monk. This used to be like Drestagath, right? I would bind Drestagath here. You'd cancel Bladestorm, Drest them, and it also would do Touch of Death. And it'd cancel Fist of Fury too for monks. So once more, cancel auras, using trinkets, using abilities, showing tooltips. You guys know all about that. But this basically just shows my trinket in slot 13. This is another one of those things where when I'm talented for 3-2, when I'm talented for Fervor Battle, it'll Whirlwind. But if I'm talented for Rend or Massacre, it'll Slam, right? So that's just a button that I'm not even really using that right now, but I just have Slam sitting there so I can look at it. Wow, we went through all of my general macros. I don't think my Bajheera specific warrior macros are anything that you haven't seen, but just in case, let's go check them out. This is Overpower Ignore Pain, but I'm not using Ignore Pain with it. This is my normal Overpower bind. This is Bloodthirst. This is doing the same thing as the Mortal Strike Arena bind. It's just Bloodthirst instead. See, those two are the same. This is Charge. I'm pretty sure this is the same thing that I had before. It was doing... I'm still canceling Aura Spore Pods, which I don't need anymore. It's doing Bloodthirst, but I don't think I want to do that. I don't think this is any different than this one. I just don't know which one I'm using. So let me see if I edit this. Which one am I using as my bind? I'm using this one. Okay. So let's go ahead and just call that C then, just to be clear. It's going to charge, it's going to hamstring, it will not rend, it will not mortal strike, it will cancel or Bladestorm, it will not Bloodthirst, and it will taunt all the pets. Which is fine, because I think that's what everything this one was doing, right? Same thing. Good. Same macro, but I have a bound Bajheera specific this time. But yeah, this is basically charge hamstring macro. I just have other stuff in there too to play around with it. And cancel or Bladestorm and taunt. This is Focus Stormbolt again. We've seen this already over here. I think this is probably the one I'm actually using though, which is funny. But the reason I have it over here is to have both. I think I have... Do I have the Stormbolt lower than Bladestorm this time? Yeah, I just have it written differently. It'll do the same thing. This is the Focus Fear. It's the same sort of style, right? But this is also my Focus Charge, though. So it'll show Tooltip Intimidating Shout, so it's going to show Fear. But I have Slash Cast Target equals Focus Charge, so it's going to charge to my Focus. And it will Slash Cast Target equals Focus Intimidating Shout, which means it'll Focus Charge, and Focus Fear. It'll also cancel my Bladestorm. So if I'm Bladestorming, but I want to charge and Fear, then it'll do that. If I'm in range to Fear, but I don't need to charge, then it'll just Fear. But like if you're not quite close enough to Fear, and you are close enough to charge, it will charge. So just be careful with your spacing on this. Like if you're pretty close and you want to Fear, just walk a few extra paces and then Fear, and that way you can charge back to your target. But if you're out of range, then this will also Fear them. But if you're gonna heroic leap Fear, then just make sure that you like land before you go for the Fear, so that you don't like charge too, right? You don't want to do that. You just want to leap, land, then Fear, and then you can charge back to whatever your target was. But those are just a general focus target for Fear. Or sorry, focus macro for Fear that you charge with as well. Sometimes if I get annoyed, sometimes I'll cancel the charge part of this to just be Fear, but I think having a focus charge is kind of nice too. Because then you can also just leap back, or if you're Night Fae, you can blink back, so you have more ability. So you can Night Fae Fear, you can heroic leap Fear, charge Fear, whatever. But this will charge you to your target, so then you can just heroic leap back if you wanted to. Same thing with Focus Pummel. I think I do have some of these in both places, because like if I play other warriors, I just want to still have my Focus macros and Pummel macros, or I can always just import too. But this Pummel will cancel my Bladestorm and Pummel my Focus. This is one of those newbie macros that I was telling you guys about, Rally with Hellstone and Battle Standard, mostly something that you're going to use in BGs, but because there are times where you're going to want to rally your teammate but not use Hellstone on yourself, so using Hellstone in this macro probably not optimal, but Battle Standard is probably fine, because if you're in a BG you can do whatever. This is that Mortal Strike macro I was telling you about. It'll set your focus, it'll cast Mortal Strike, and it'll taunt pets. This is just a cancel or a Bladestorm and a Pummel. I also have Victory Rush in here. You're not usually just gonna like, sometimes this is just a quirky thing that I have for my keybinding setup. I have Victory Rush on 1 and I have Pummel on Alt 1. Sometimes in a BG you're freaking out. You're like, okay, I just killed somebody. I want to spam my Victory Rush and pummel somebody who's casting, and so you just press both 1 and Alt 1, and that'll cast Victory Rush. It's quirky and weird, but it's probably fine. It won't cast Victory Rush if you don't have Victory Rush, obviously, which is fine. This is a slam that will cancel sweeping strikes. This is not something I'm using right now, but it does exist. I'll just leave it alone. This is my Stormbolt macro, so it'll show the tooltip for Stormbolt. It will cancel the Bladestorm aura, and it will stun. So it's like if I'm Bladestorming and I want to stun somebody right then, I press this button, boom, no more Mortal Strike, or sorry, no more Bladestorm, and it'll stun. Good stuff. This is my Heroic Throw macro. It'll check a Heroic Throw, but if for some reason I press this button while they're in range, it'll hamstring them. This is not something I use for hamstring, it's just something that's kind of funny. I don't know why I have hamstring in here, but that's fine. This is Victory Rush, so it'll show the tooltip Victory Rush, it'll cancel Bladestorm, it'll cast Victory Rush, it will not cast Pummel, but it will also cancel Hand of Protection. Don't usually use this to cancel Hand of Protection. Sometimes I feel like I should probably just delete or not use this part. But yeah, you can do that in this button. But it will cast Ignore Pain, so like you're killing mobs, slaying people in BGs, you get Victory Rush, you have some rage, you can spend it on Ignore Pain too. Just this is another place I have Ignore Pain. Like I told you earlier, I have experimental Ignore Pain binds in a lot of different places. But that does bring us to the end of my macros. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of how to write macros and what macros I have. There's a lot of other cool stuff that you can do. Like I said, I don't use a lot of at cursor stuff, but you can do that. Basically, for me, it's showing the tooltip, using an ability, either on my target or my focus target. Sometimes I will have those talent swap macros. Sometimes I'll be canceling auras, but really not all that complicated. Once you learn how to write a macro, you can kind of play around with a lot of this stuff yourself, as long as you understand the rules and what you can do. But there are other macro formats that I probably don't know about that I'd like to learn about. Like I said, learning about the talent thing was pretty cool, and we'll just kind of keep going from there. But if you guys have any neat macros, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'd love to see them. But with my macros completed, I think now we can dive into my keybinds, which are potentially even more weird. But let's take a look. All right, so to reiterate, my keybinds are a little weird. They are very subjective, and you should definitely use keybinds that you like and that feel good and make sense to you. So, with that being said, keep in mind that I use a Corsair Scimitar Elite mouse. Has a bunch of buttons on the side, a 12-button keypad on the side, which is lovely. Really changed the game. So if you guys are looking for a way to expand your keybinds or have more comfortable keybinds, I definitely recommend that you look into a Corsair Scimitar series from our lovely sponsor, Corsair. Depending on which one you buy, you may even find me on the box. So that's pretty fun too. But I didn't always have an MMO mouse. And when I didn't have an MMO mouse, I bound a lot of stuff to my mouse wheel and my mouse click. So I still use those keybinds a little, but not nearly as much as I used to. But some of them are legacy binds, and we'll go into that. So I think we will start at the bottom of my action bar. Once again, the add-on that I use to set this action bar up this way is Bartender. So middle mouse button click is that charge macro that just charges me to my target. But what it actually is, sorry, that's a lie. What this button actually does is looks like charge, so it shows me visually charge, but it is actually my stance swap macro. That's just where I want it bound. I like to swap stances with middle mouse button click. That's not a button I press a ton, but it's just something that's there. I like it. And then Alt middle mouse button is my taunt, but also will swap stances. And the reason why that is, this is just a quirky thing for me, is that sometimes when I'm going to Colossus Smash, which is Alt F, I want to also swap the battle stance during that, and if I'm holding down Alt when I get ready to press F to Colossus Smash, and I'm in battle stance or D stance, and I want to go battle, sometimes it's just nice to be able to press middle mouse button click and Alt F at the same time, so I also have it bound to Alt to swap stances. This is also taunt, so that's neat. Shift middle mouse button 3 is another keybind I don't use super often, but it's challenging shout. That's just where you shout AoE taunt. Now, mouse wheel up for me shows Mortal Strike, but if I press it, it'll slam. It's also that intervene button. So my mouse over intervenes are basically just mouse wheel up and down, but it'll also slam my target. So like if I'm trying to kill a totem, it'll slam that totem while I'm clicked on it, right? And then middle mouse, or there's just mouse wheel down is going to be overpower with ignore pain, and also mouse over intervene. So I showed you all these macros now, basically telling you where they're bound, right? So Alt wheel up on the mouse is actually dual, but it looks like slam. And then Alt mouse wheel down is disarm and all those flags, but it looks like execute. Now Shift mouse button 1 is my Avatar and Deadly Calm macro. And C is my PvP, my human trinket. And I kind of want to do this in 2 separate chunks, right? So we're going to go like basically this little chunk of my action bar first, because all this stuff is on my mouse. A few of these things are on my mouse, right? So this is all mouse wheel stuff right here. This is one thing that's on my mouse, like button. But I'm going to go over here first. So these are the normal keybinds. This is just 1 on the keyboard is Victory Rush. 2 is Reflect. 3 is Berserker Rage. 4 is Fearing my target, that also cancels my auto attack. R is Leap. F is Sharpen Blade. G is mostly visual, but it will swap stances for me. I used to use G to swap stances more, but I just like I like putting a lot of stuff on my mouse. It just feels really smooth. But it will swap stances for me. T is my trinket, so it'll use that trinket in slot 14, my second trinket. Oftentimes that's where I'll bind my get out of CC trinket if I'm not using this trinket, which just reduces CC overall. And then X is parry. And then Alt 1 is Pummel. Once again, don't make fun of me for my keybinds, all right? Alt 1 is Pummel. Alt 2 is Heroic Throw. Alt 3 is Shatter my target. Alt 4 is Shatter my focus target. Alt R is my Ancient Shockwave. This is also where I would bind Kyrian Spear, like if I played Kyrian. Alt F is Warbreaker. Now, we are getting into mouse binds at this point. So this stuff is pretty much my keyboard. When you see an N in front of my bind, that means it's on my mouse, because I have my mouse buttons corresponding to my number pad. So N7 means number pad 7, but what it actually means is button 7 on my Scimitar mouse. So this is the Whirlwind Rend Skull Splitter thing. N8, which is the Scimitar button 8, will be Piercing Howl, and then Z is my Rallying Cry. Up here, this is just visual for Disarm and Duel. My Night Fade Blink is actually on mouse button 10, which shows as 0, because that's what the sort of number pad on the keyboard corresponds to. Alt button 10 on my mouse is Hellstone. Then I have Alt mouse button 7 and Alt mouse button 9, which I might actually switch this. I might make this one for my partner Veen. I might do that on 8 and switch banner to 9. But anyway, Alt mouse button 7 is Healer Veen. Alt mouse button 9 is partner Veen. This is just visual, shows my trinket. And then I have banner on Alt mouse button 8. This is also just visual for slam. Then we get to over here. So how this works is that these are normal binds, these are alt binds. These are normal binds, these are alt binds. So my charge is on mouse button 1. Focus Pummel is on mouse button 2. Stormbolt is on mouse button 3. Then we go to Alt mouse button 1 is Focus Charge, Focus Fear. Alt mouse button 2 is Bladestorm. Alt mouse button 3 is Focus Stormbolt. Then you have my main rotation takes place right here, right? So I have this is also Charge Hamstring. But I have the second hamstring bind just because in PvP, like I said, I'm trying to slam less, and this just visually looks good to me. So I have my Mortal Strike Taunt, set my focus on mouse button 4, my good old Overpower on mouse button 5, and then hamstring, slam, or cleave, depending on what I'm talented for, will be on mouse button 6. And this is a little bit different than I used to have it, but this is for the rotation, the priority, and what feels good, and what looks good to me. Is I changed a little bit for Shadowlands. I used to have this as Slam Whirlwind, but now I have this as Overpower and Hamstring, or whatever else, right? For Cleave or Slam. For single target Slam, for Mythic Plus, it'd be Cleave. Alt mouse button 4, I have as that Ignore Pain Overpower button. Alt mouse button 5 is that good old Execute button. Man, I love Execute right now. It's so hard. It's lovely. It's a dream come true. Love it. And then Alt mouse button 6 is my Sweeping Strikes. And then I have some binds over on the side here that are just kind of freaky. Like, mouse button 12 is my Cancel, Sweeping Strikes, Freedom, Bop. Mouse button 9 is my Battle Shout, with alt mouse button 9 being this. I have my Gliders on mouse button 11. Alt mouse button 11 will infuse me with Anima, which I haven't used yet. I want to try that out. Alt mouse button 12 is my shoot people off their flying mounts thing. And then I have Shift 1, 2, and 3 are mounts. And I think... Holy moly, is that on my binds? Is that on my macros? I think that just about does it for this video. Are we going to be under an hour for this thing? Maybe. Holy moly. I told you this was a long video, and this is why I don't do my macros and keybinds with my warrior guide, because my warrior guide is going to be somewhat comprehensive as well. If I end up making a comprehensive warrior guide, which I want to, it's going to be a speed read, I promise. It's probably still going to take an hour, though. But at least I can reference some of my other videos. This also makes it a little bit easier for me to make these kind of videos. I can kind of knock them out just little by little, and that helps. But I want to go through my add-ons and my weak auras separately, because that's probably going to be another 1 hour video. But this goes through my macros and keybinds. My objective for this was to teach you guys how to write a macro, and also show you different sort of macro formats that can do different kinds of cool stuff, so you can then go in and play around with it to make it work the way that you want to. And then of course the keybinds I find is probably mostly just for like curiosity and interest. But I do think that this is a keybind setup that feels pretty good to me. I don't feel like I'm having to reach all the way across my keyboard to do stuff all that often. I feel like it's a pretty comfortable position for my hand to sit while I'm playing. Like, my main modifier is Alt, whereas some people might like Shift or Control. That's just how I started playing, because I feel like it was way back in the day with WoW on my 08 MacBook Pro laptop, where my main modifier that I used was on my thumb, kind of curled up the way it is right now, and that's just kind of transitioned into Alt is where that ends up being for me now. So it just feels comfortable for me. So I use Alt for a lot of stuff, but I really only bind like 1 through 4, R, F, ZXCV, like those, or ZXC for like my stuff. So I feel like that's pretty compact for my hand on my left hand, and then my right hand does a bunch of the mouse stuff, which ends up feeling really, really comfortable and good for me. And keep in mind, I may play around with these keybinds a little bit more as the expansion goes on. I may make new macros. I may use macros that I'm not using currently. I may not use macros that I am currently using a little bit, but obviously we can kind of keep you guys up to date on that on the stream. But I'm pretty proud that we were able to knock out a whole macro video. Went through all my macros. Took a while, but hopefully you guys learned something in particular about how to write a macro, but also what macros I think are cool. Like I said, different macro formats. I showed you my keybinds, which are kind of weird, but they are subjective to me and they feel pretty good. So boom, we did it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Plenty more warrior guides and warrior information, and when I play other classes, I plan to make macro and keybind videos for those guys too, probably. And of course, keep an eye out for add-ons videos and other things down the line, because there's lots of information to share with Shadowlands, and I'm definitely pumped to keep sharing it with you guys. Make sure that if you watched this entire video, you give yourself a massive high five, and give the video a nice thumbs up, leave a nice comment, subscribe, and enable notifications for more. But for now, that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time. Peace!